Hello, my name is Gareth Dennis. I'm a railway engineer, writer, and host of the Archipelago series. It's a long-running series in Transport Fever 2 that takes history, engineering, politics, and shows how they combine to give you the most realistic and fun maps to play in possible within the vanilla game. Transport Fever 3 is coming, and so far we've had 4 deep dive videos, plus a shorter tease on vehicles, with Kernel Failure guiding us through some of the features we're going to expect to see in the new game, accompanied by these fantastic visuals, letting us get a real feel for what Transport Fever 3 is going to look like. With all of these having landed, I thought it might be worth taking a closer look with my engineering eye at some of the key themes that make these games the most fun, but also the most challenging and, I think, realistic and interesting simulations of creating urban and regional transportation systems possible. The first of these is the natural world. Now, what we've seen of the ability to create the game world and also the quality of the output is, I'm going to be honest with you, absolutely stunning. I cannot wait to start ploughing heavy civil engineering through all this lot in early game and then later in the game trying to attempt to mitigate all the mess that I've made. It looks stunning, and it looks also crucially big, because scale for transportation systems is really important. Those early Transport Fever 2 maps are very small. You lose that element of realism with those shorter distances, so long distance is really important. And the quality of the quality, the interest, the realism, it looks realistic, and the immersion that you get as a player of the Transport Fever games is it really requires the quality, that beauty that you get from the scale of the simulation, but also the quality of the simulation of the kind of the natural world. It looks really good, and there's a good variation between different biomes as well. I'm going to be interested to see how they, what the variability is in those, in terms of when you dig into them. Scale, I'm really curious to see what the scale of the maps is. That's going to be absolutely crucial to giving it's interesting cities, because a big city takes up a full map, but also if you want that intercity feeling, that feeling of intercity connectivity, it's going to be really nice to get those longer distances. And also hopefully we can create different aspect ratios of map as well. But no, I think these look absolutely stunning. You've got the kind of the flat plains, the mountains, forested areas. It really is stunning. I think what's going to be really interesting is to see, and we've not got a hugely insightful view of this yet, is the way that the town simulation, the kind of the procedural town generation actually interact, and the roads. This looks pretty good. How these interact, how the built environment actually ends up interacting with the natural environment. But I think, overall, my impression so far of seeing these, and that's why I've given us these nice long shots, let them sit. I think this looks stunning. I think it's going to be a real delight to see the worlds that you've worked on, the kind of the transportation networks that have organically built up, just as we do in the Archipelago series, to see those interacting with these kind of really fantastically beautiful procedurally generated landscapes. I cannot wait, honestly. And there's a feast. There's all sorts. We've got this sort of jungle-looking place. It's very sort of tropical sort of vibes. But also the volcanoes. What I have no idea what we're going to do with volcanoes, but they do look cool. I think it's the scale. Again, it's this kind of tropical Island Nublar type vibe. I think there's just the possibilities are limitless, and I'm excited. I was going to do a US series a while back, and I thought, no, Archipelago is too much fun. But this is also a feast. Look at this. Look at the possibilities are pretty endless, and that's what good procedurally generated landscapes allow. They allow limitless potential. Oh, look at Scotland. Yeah, that also excites me as the person who's always like, I'm going to make my home in the game I'm at. The key thing, though, is having a stunning natural environment within which our built environment can sit. And I'm talking about towns and cities. Where Transport Fever stands out versus other city builders like City Skylines is the fact that you have real time progression, which allows you to really buy into the communities, the towns, the cities that you are serving with your transport systems. Some of that comes from the quality of the assets. Some of it comes from procedural generation. Look at these towns, the aged towns, the fact that you've got this nice time progression, you've got these older buildings, the assets, they look good at street level, which is really impressive. They also feel good when you step back, when you pull away. Look at this, look at this little guy, little car pulling up. We don't actually know what date they're going to be starting, but the evidence at the moment is inclined to be that it starts in 1900. That might have been formally recorded. Anyway, the point is that it's the scale at close in and when you pull away that these communities, towns, feel real. Some comes from procedural generation, some of it comes from the tycoon elements that are getting quite the boost. some sizable expansion compared to Transport Fever 2 in the kind of the tycoon gameplay. But a lot of it actually comes from the story that you build into these towns, the way that they expand based on the choices that you as a player make over a long time period. And understanding how real history goes with transport allows you to build up towns that look, feel, and most importantly, play realistically. Now, from what we've seen, those cities in Transport Fever 3 look really tremendous. They bring everything we loved about TPF 2, combining it with the quality of the natural environment to create something that I think is pretty special. Look, the quality of the game, the fidelity of the generation, and the fact that we're getting a whole range of additional levers to make better or worse decisions about transit is going to mean that attachment, that development of attachment, and also the quality of the city. Look, there's a good difference in density. As you zoom in and out, these towns and cities, they're feeling good. So all those additional levers are what really help maximize the enjoyment of the game. So more levers means more good and bad decisions, and how we unpick those decisions in a realistic way is what maximizes my enjoyment of the game. It's not just about cities, though. We want towns in rural areas that look realistic, because you don't want every single thing to be an enormous city. You want to connect smaller rural areas with a bigger city. And I have to say, some of the images we've seen show a pretty decent range of big dense cities and also towns and smaller towns even. Combine that with the new diurnal cycle, which, everyone should be really excited about this, because this looks so good. I cannot wait to start seeing our... Transport Fever 2 gave us a hint of this, because you could tell they'd intended to add it and they never got around to it, because there were things like lights and so on and so on. Actually having these activated, our towns are going to look really good. As I say, little towns, but also scale. It's scale that we want to see. The connections between the cities, the size of our cities, but also connecting out to the hinterland, to the towns. That sense of scale is where Transport Fever 3 will really step it up compared to its competitors. Linking up towns and cities requires infrastructure, though, and this is where we're going to have a quick look at bridges and tunnels. We get a real feast of choice in the new game from what we've seen from images. So these really define how our places look. Whether it's rural, whether it's urban, these big highways where we're being given quite a lot of choice. Actually, let's start with highways. So a diurnal cycle looking so good. So we've got we've got these nice sort of. Basically, this gives us a chance to see there are new tools for constructing highway intersections, which is going to be really helpful. Kernel failure goes into a lot of these, so I don't need to go into those in detail, but where I'm interested in these bridges, is the way that the bridges interact with the other roads, but also how we see them kind of, the interaction between gaining elevation, going over the top is something that was always a little bit stilted in TPF 2. So it's going to be interesting to see. It looks potentially like they've tidied that up a little bit. It's great that we're also getting lane control. If you're creating highways, it was always pretty fast and loose in TPF 2. The ability to control lane, what lanes connect into what is really important. So there you go. More of those bridges, seeing them inside. Also, nice view of when you're up on top of a big viaduct. There's also different bridge structures there. You can see. So. The tracks. This is where we get interested. So we've got ballasted, we've got high speed, and now we've got dedicated slab, which I'm very pleased about as a civil engineer, but particularly as a track engineer. But also you see some of these lovely kind of modern looking bridge structures. They look slightly ridiculous. I'm always a bit like, make it a bit more prototypical, but hopefully we'll get a good wide range of different bridge types. Here's a nice shot of the slab track. It looks really nice. I think it does look really, really, really smart. I like that a lot. There's that structure again, looking fancy and a little bit over-engineered. But look, here's a wooden trestle, and crucially, tunnels with arched supports and some concrete ones for different sort of size of tunnels. And then crucially, we're going underground, which I'm very excited about. Trams going underground means that you can kind of emulate underground railways. So maybe not high-density underground systems, but using the trams to go underground is going to give you that little bit of additional choice. Ultimately, what you look at, it looks a bit like a German Stadtbahn that you're being allowed to build here. This is nice because essentially what you're getting is you've got kind of the Stadtbahn style of tram, but also what's quite fun is that you're getting tram trains, so it actually connects up onto your tracks, your mainline tracks as well. So I'm quite interested to see what that looks like. Lastly, I'm not sure about getting rid of infrastructure and it not leaving a mess on the ground. That always was something that I thought was quite important. Crucial for the story you're trying to tell with your transportation systems is the architecture of your stations. So we've got, we've got a little sneak of some of the harbours. The little ones look nice. I think these big harbours look really nice. I think they look a lot nicer than the TPF2 style of architecture. There's a good sense of scale. Also, what's quite nice here is you've got that nice integration with the kind of the sidings in the background. That looks really smart. It looks really nice. Airports. So here's a little airport. Looks pretty good. What I think is really important Also, yeah, it just does look nicely integrated into the landscape. What I think is really important is that that seems to have a bit of a closer match to the architecture of the larger international airport. So here you've got your stations, and from this we get a chance to see, this little clip here. You get a chance to see some of the different options for building station. The different choices of the scale of station connections. So you've got small, medium, large, because it's not just the big stations that are important. It's also what your little stations look like. What's interesting here is the integration of freight and passenger stations. The way that those integrate is going to be quite interesting as well. But they fit quite nicely. I quite like the modern architecture style. They've toned it down a little bit from the Calatrava-esque sort of design from TPF2. It's a little bit spanning a few different decades a little bit more neatly. So again, there's a nice little station again at night time as well. So, but then the medium size stations, that you've got this kind of Beaux-Arts Grand European station. I think the big station, I think that looks really tremendous. I think the missed trick here, though, is that we still don't have proper train sheds. We do not have canopies, those lovely vaulted canopies of, varying eras over our tracks. I think that's still a really big missed opportunity. I'd have loved to see that added. So from station architecture to the architecture of our industries. Industries are the backbone of gameplay for Transport Fever, and I have to say in Transport Fever 2 the aesthetic of those industries was one of the weaker elements of the game. They really mixed eras. It really threw you out of your immersion if you were in 1850 and there were container ships and sort of road markings on the industries. So I'll be interested to see if they continue to just ignore that factor, or perhaps bring some element of time progression into the industry development. Look, the industries look really good. We just saw farming there. Farms look pretty good. Some of the architecture that's interesting in terms of there is some nice brick-built industries. There's a sense of sort of timelessness about some of them. Others look a little bit more of their era. That's just something that, if it is the case within vanilla game that they're kind of fixed in time, then so be it. You just swallow it. But it's one of the things that I'd have liked to see. They could do time progression in terms of the sort of procedurally generated buildings. It's a shame they haven't thought about that for the industries. They do look really good, don't get me wrong. And there's quite a lot of moving parts, there's lights. They've really amped up the use of the game engine to maximise the stuff. Some of the user interface stuff about industries looks a lot cleaner and more useful as well. I've not included the images about the ability to expand those industries and the kind of the warehousing associated with them, but that is absolutely has been expanded, and there's a lot more choice involved there. And these look good. I think these look really good. This is the brewery, which again, like the fact that we've had an expansion of those industries also adds itself a bit of aesthetic variation, a bit of aesthetic opportunity and choice to make those worlds feel more interesting. They add complexity to the sorts of gameplay that you're going to see, to some of the justification for why an industry might be in a certain location and so on. So I'm excited about that. I do think that some of these look good, but again, I'm wary about that element of shiny plastic looking industries in the early part of the 20th century, if that's when the game era is going to start. Look, I know people might be wondering, what about cargo trams? You've not said anything about those. You're not super excited. Look, there aren't many cargo trams out there, and I like realistic gameplay. That doesn't mean I'm not interested to see what the opportunities are. But no, in this segment, no, I'm more focused on that architecture piece. This looks good. This looks nice. But again, this looks kind of mid to late 20th century, which again, is important. The game will be played at that point. Anyway, it depends how you play the game. Different people play in different ways. This was always one of the things that pulled me a bit out of the gameplay, was the kind of having this shiny metal pipework. But I think, that there's going to be this range of opportunity, range of options. They sit nice in the terrain. I think the fact that you're going to have more variation in how industry looks as you expand different sort of industrial plopped items, as we're going to steal some SimCity language, the variation you can grow into those industrial sites, different. Every single one will look different. I think that's really important. I also think this looks absolutely fantastic as a factory. Water factories is a new feature of the game. Now this is interesting. There's fish farms, which is kind of an interesting option. It kind of adds, moving things by boat as a necessary part of gameplay. I quite like that. Again, okay, the diurnal cycle looks really nice. That's fine. Also, clouds, weather. This is all really nice stuff. For me, this is fun because it makes having harbours and having fishing fleets become kind of like a realistic thing. So this is adding gameplay elements. Likewise with the dredging here to get sand. I quite like that. I think that's quite a nice addition. All these little bits and pieces are helping to diversify what sort of a game you're going to end up playing, and also give options for like introducing new industries as you get through the game. Oil rigs are a particularly interesting factor. This gives you your justification for having helicopters. This is, again, quite interesting. I like this. Just think of the archipelago having oil rigs off its coast. That's kind of fun. What about shipping containers and also tourism, question mark? Which then raises a lot of questions about big picture gameplay. Look, obviously there are major changes to the way that, for example, depots and maintenance of vehicles is going to look. I think that adds some really interesting elements. I quite like that. It's going to diversify the way that you have to play the game. I think that's really interesting. There's another thing which I think is really nice, which is kind of the regionalization of the game, the kind of the cities themselves, but also the kind of the regions, these borders being set, which I quite like as well. For anyone knowing the Archipelago series, that excites me. But also these sort of landmarks being introduced and how those are going to, fit into gameplay. One part of it is, again, diversifying how your map looks, but also, to what extent those are going to interact with gameplay. I'm interested about this. This looks fun. Also, I like lighthouses. Isn't that lovely? The diurnal cycle. I'm so excited. And then the last thing, which is really interesting, is no longer is the kind of the capital building, the kind of your headquarters, a kind of just an aesthetic choice. You're going to place this in your capital city, as it were, the regional capital, or whatever you want to call it, and the ability to expand this thing with kind of add-ons and plugins. It's very SimCity, isn't it? It's like your town hall sort of thing. The ability to kind of make there be an obvious central city that will then get benefits from having this building within it. I like that. That aids in the gameplay and looks really nice. I've gone through a few key themes of what I think we have in store for us with the new game, how it compares to the old game, and how that might influence, well, for me at least, what I learn in terms of actual real transportation systems from the game, because that's a lot of the fun to be had with it. What do you think, though? What do you think Kernel Failure is going to bring us next? Leave a comment below, and I look forward to seeing what you think.